Hi, welcome back everyone. We're here with another Octatrack video. Today we are going to talk more in depth about what the Octatrack can do, specifically about how parts work and what is a part in the Octatrack. Um, it's definitely one of the more confusing elements, and I'm still kind of wrapping my brain around what it can do. So the part, we have this button that says part. If we hit part, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 different parts available. And what the part allows us to do is change the machine type, whether it's like a flex machine or through machine or static or whatever, as well as change the sample that is loaded into the machine. However, the part does not let us change the trig information. So if you have, a sliced pattern that you have created, or a sequence, we should call it, on track 2, for example, and then if you go into track 2 on a different part, the trig sequence remains the same. The trig sequence also holds the any parameter locks that you have recorded into the trig sequence. Like for example, on this first trig here, we have the pitch down an octave. That is consistent on all of the parts. However, if you have a parameter that is not locked to a trig, that parameter is independent between parts. For example, the amp volume. In part 1 here, the amp volume is at minus 34. But if I go to part 2, the amp volume is up at minus 8. So it is a bit strange, right? The part contains the sample as well as all of these parameters unless the parameter is being locked by a trig, in which case the trig will overwrite the parameter. The part also contains scene information. For example, if I have a scene set up in part 1 and I switch over to part 2, that scene is gone. It is not going to carry over into part 2. You will need to set up a whole new scene for the B thing, the B scene. I don't know what you call these buttons. Yeah, does that make sense so far? So now I'm going to go through the beat I've made and kind of explain what's happening. We'll play it first and then I'll talk about it more. Start with part 1. Yeah. So, a few things that happened there. At first, I let the sequence play pretty much the full 4 bars, before I went to change the part. That kind of made it so that each part was a different part of the same pattern, or like a different section of the pattern. Then I went a little bit more crazy with it. I was changing the parts quickly within that 4-bar sequence to create randomness and variation. You have to be careful though, because if you change the parts super rapidly like that, you do run into the chance of like, sometimes it gets confused, or like sometimes the samples don't get trigged. Like if you quickly jump between the parts super fast, you noticed at the end of the little demo I did, the drums completely cut out, and that was not like an intentional thing that I set up. That was just something that happened because the Octatrack said, "Oh, what part are we actually playing? You're going too fast." So this is kind of, it's one of the weird quirks about Octatrack parts. It's kind of like the samples are playing like musical chairs, right? So on part 1 here, on part 1, I have my keys happening on track 2. I have a lead on track 3, and I have this little blippy thing on track 7. That's all well and good. But then when we go into part 2, we have the keys on track 7, we have the blippy thing on track 3, and we have the lead up on track 2. So everything traded spots. And what that means is that even though we're using the same samples, we're using the same sounds, but they are being triggered entirely differently. They're being triggered as the other parts were in the previous part, or as the other samples were being triggered in the previous part. It's so heady, all this terminology, so I don't know if this makes any sense at all. To kind of demonstrate what's happening, maybe I'm going to make a thing. I'm going to make a thing on track 4 so you can just see as I do it live, right? So this is part 2 here. It's a full thing. We have the synths, we have the drums, we have the bass. It's all there. If we go into part 4, I haven't even touched part 4 yet. You can see our trig lights are still there, which means that, the pattern still exists. But I don't know if you can see on the thing, all the tracks have been reset to static machines. So we need to change that. The first thing I will do is change track 2 to a flex machine, turn on slicing. Track 3, flex machine, slicing on. Sometimes it's fun to have, if you're playing with your different parts and you've got a sample that you've sliced and chopped up, it's fun to put that sample onto a machine that has slicing off, which means it's just going to kind of trigger from random points in the sample. It doesn't know where your slices are unless slicing is actually enabled. So that's a fun way to kind of get two slice types from the same sample. That really makes no sense at all, but it's heady. I know. Flex, slice on, yeah, okay. So what do I want? On track 5, I still want my drum. On track 6, I still want the percussion, and we're gonna go ahead and kill those in the Q mix and turn them up in the main. Everything else gets turned off in the main mix and is only going to be sent out of the Q. Part 4, I really don't want that to be the bass. This needs to be, let's give this one the blip. This one is going to be keys. Sure, why not? It's going to be crazy, but okay. This one is still the bass, and this is going to be the lead. Yeah, so now we've created a whole different part. I guess the thing that's bothering me now is I've assigned the blip to track 2 in part 4, and I have all these trigs here, but they're not really doing anything. Here's what I'll do. We need to slice it. There's no slices on it yet, right? Yeah, we need to add some slices. For this to work better, we need to have slices. Yeah. So slice there, sure. Slice here. Yep, cool. Okay, now does it sound better? Yeah. Is it continuous? Oh my goodness. It takes like management, you know? You have to consider what you want to do and how it's going to happen. Like what I did was the blip wasn't really playing at all, so I went ahead and sliced that up. And the cool thing is, since it's sliced on part 4, when we go back into part 3, blip is happening on track 3 and slicing is off. So it's going to just play us the one shot of that sample that I recorded. But if we go into part 4, it's going to play slices of it. So you can really decide how the samples are going to happen. But now my problem is when I went into, if we go into part 4, I have this keys sample, right? And I don't really want to add more trigs to part 3 here. This video really makes no sense. It's so heady. It's so heady. I'm trying to get actual information in here. Parts. The parts let you choose what sample is happening where, and if it's being sliced or not, and what parameters are happening to it. But you have to be careful because the trigs also play a part in it, and the trigs are consistent on all of the parts. So many words, so confusing. Lord, how would I remedy this keys thing for it to really be cool? What do I want to do about it? crazy, truly crazy. A lot to wrap your head around, but once you kind of set up the workflow in a way that makes sense to you, it really can be fun to experiment. Like I'm jumping super fast between like part 3 and 4 parts, like all the parts. I'm jumping really fast between them, and you did notice like sometimes if I trigger part 3 to happen, or if I trigger part 4, it doesn't actually take it. It stays on part 3, but then I just jump to part 4 on the next like bar or the next beat, and it kind of like flows in. So strange, so cool, so much fun. Um, Hopefully this is like helpful in some way. I know it's very confusing. It's very, very confusing. You have to work around the fact that the trigs are going to be consistent on all the parts. Now, of course, you could make just a new pattern and have that new pattern play stuff in the next part, but that kind of locks you in. You know, it's not like I could jump between pattern 1 and pattern 2 at will. If I want to jump from pattern 1 to pattern 2, I have to wait for pattern 1 to actually finish playing before before pattern 2 will play. Whereas the parts don't care where you are in the pattern. You can change the part whenever you want. Truly, truly crazy. I don't know if I want to say, I don't really have anything more to say. I'm still learning, you know? Um, Crazy, crazy stuff that this thing can do. And I've barely scratched the surface, but this was a video about Octatrack parts. Hopefully it was helpful. I'm still confused.